Good morning. I think we'll do a little sound check. 1, 2, 3. How's that? Does that work? All right. Well, no fun or interesting stories like last week, so getting along pretty well. Wish I could get a good night's sleep somehow, but that's okay. If you want to be turning to our text for our class this morning, I'm going to refer to one of my favorite parables. And it's in Luke chapter 12. Starting verse 13, the parable of the rich fool. There's a lot of reasons I like this parable. There's a lot of lessons that we can take from it. So I did want to make a brief announcement regarding classes coming up, adult class. There will be on Sunday morning an adult class still meeting in the annex as normal. They've been on PTP videos the whole quarter, several quarters. We want to try to take a break from that, and there'll be a class up there. And I think Kirk Brewster and Jeremiah Schnell are going to co-teach that particular class on Sunday morning. And then on Wednesday evening, again, that class has been watching PTP videos, and I'll be teaching a class back there on Revelation. So we'll be kind of introducing that this Wednesday, which would be January 1st. So I will be teaching that class and doing an introduction and giving you some material and some things for that particular class. I'm excited about that class. I try not to get intimidated at all. I've taught it a couple times. I've been in a college level course on Revelation, taught by Stafford North, who also wrote book. And so we'll get through it, and it'll be fun. We'll make it fun. Revelation is fun. All right, let's. I'm going to read through the text this morning, and as I read, I always like to, ask the class to make either a mental note or jot down a note on paper, anything that stands out to you in the text. It's always good. I mean, when I'm reading, text, I, verse by verse or whatever, I'll, just make a mental note. Sometimes it'll be in my Bible. Sometimes it'll be on a sheet of paper. But, just some things to kind of discuss that you get. I want to know some things that you get from this particular parable of Jesus. So, Luke chapter 12, starting with verse 13. Then one from the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus said to him, "Man, who made me judge or an arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses." So then he speaks a parable to them, and he said, "The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, 'What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops?' So he said, 'Well, I'll do this. I'll pull down my barns, and I'll build greater. And there I will store up my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry.'" Verse 20, "But God said to him, 'Fool, this very night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich toward God. So, lots of things that we can pull from this particular parable. I have probably 5 pages of notes, and I know we won't address all of those, but something. Malcolm Forbes was an American entrepreneur, and he's most well known for, obviously, a publisher of Forbes magazine. And he's also remembered for several sayings, and one of the things that he would say that is, he who has the most toys wins. And, you might expect that from someone who lived an extravagant life, flamboyant lifestyle. He spent millions on, perhaps maybe billions on parties and traveling, his yachts and aircraft, and even artifacts that he would purchase for, millions of dollars. I remember there was a certain period of time when there was a popular line of clothing called No Fear. It'd be like No Fear gear. And they had one shirt that kind of addressed, I don't know if it was intentional or not, Malcolm's quote, but the shirt said that he who dies with the most toys still dies. And so it kind of speaks to this parable of the rich fool. But it's an interesting start. In verse 1 of the chapter, there's a bunch of people, an innumerable multitude of people gathered together, so they were even trampling one another to hear what Jesus had to say, to listen when he spoke. And so someone in verse 13, as we start, even before the parable starts, in verse 16, someone just stands up in the crowd. I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine doing this myself. But he stands up and he says, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." What does that remind you of? Yeah, petty, for one, some pettiness. Some self-centeredness, obviously. I just can't imagine the master, speaking to everyone and talking about, fearing God and confessing Christ before men, and then all of a sudden, this guy, this dude, stands up and makes a kind of a request, or a very strong request of Jesus. Who else? Who else do we remember about wanting his inheritance? Prodigal son. Yeah. Give me my inheritance. How did that go? How did that go for the gentleman, the young man? So he asked this request, and I assume he's possibly the younger of the brothers, but the older brother has the inheritance, and so Jesus answers him. Surprisingly enough, he answers him with this statement: "Who made me judge or an arbitrator over you?" What about Jesus' answer? What message does Jesus answer to this young man? What does it provide? What does it speak to? And what he says here. What does Jesus think about that? What does Jesus answer say about the request that this young man just made? Right. Yeah. Sure. Well, yeah, and whether it's the parable of the prodigal son in Luke 15, or whether it's the rich young ruler that came to Jesus in Matthew 19, again, saying, I've done this, I've kept this, I abide by this, I, basically punch my card whenever I need to. What else do I need to do? What else is required of me? And Jesus speaks to that there, just like he speaks to it here. And what Jesus is essentially saying is, we need to be thinking next life. We need to be thinking about the spiritual, not so much the physical. My mission, maybe my mission here on this earth, is not to settle these little disputes, especially when it comes to issues of no consequence and something that you want because of your selfish desires. That's not. I'm not here to be judge and jury. I'm not small claims court. I'm not the one that stands up here and says, hey, you need to give part of your inheritance, whatever's due to him, to your younger brother. That's not my mission. That's not why I'm here. It's like I didn't come to make sure that you receive a certain financial benefit and wealth. That's not why I came. So let's get the picture. Let's get the purpose. It's not about giving wealth or health or anything else. Any other thoughts on that? As we move into to verse 15, yeah, but he's making a statement, and he wants them to think about it. And he said to them, and he gives a warning in verse 15: "Take heed and beware. Beware of your covetousness, and beware of all the covetousness that you might have and that you might be thinking about and pursuing. For one's life," and he ends, "one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." So I'm thinking about that statement. Life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses. Do we get that? Do we understand that? Do we share that sentiment, that note? Do we respect that? We might say so, yeah. It sounds like a pretty good way, right, to live life. Sounds like a pretty good way to consider, our things that we might have. But I think it's, again, like we talked last week when we, think about our, spiritual wellness check. And where are we with our thinking and our priorities and the things that we consider most important in our lives. So he goes on and he starts the parable in 16. He said, the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. What point? Did anybody have a point on that? A thought? He's rich. He's already rich. He's blessed, obviously. But in my Bible, I underlined a word. And I underlined it as a reminder in that verse. So, rich man, he's already rich. He has plenty. He's wealthy. And he yielded whatever his crops yielded plentifully, whatever he did. Anything in that verse? I underlined it ground. Why? Why would that be important to note or to consider? The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. Why is that of any importance? Why is that of any consideration? Whose ground? Whose ground? The rich man's ground? Well, he might think so. I mean, he might think that this is my land, and I can, do with it however I want. I can work it however I need to, but it's my ground. I don't know who sings it, and I think I just overheard it on the radio one day, but there's a song, and the guy's talking to an older man, and the older man's talking about like, progression and building and how things have gone and how we don't have open land anymore. And essentially the old man's going to push back and he says, it's my dirt. This is my dirt. Nobody's going to build on it. No one's going to do anything with it because it's my dirt. And I kind of laugh at that because, there's a lot of property in Owasso. And there's a lot of open areas in Owasso. And it doesn't take you very far to drive around Owasso. Heather probably knows it. That there's a lot of development going on. And at some point in time, that was somebody's dirt. That was somebody's. And I remember this one area, this section of Owasso, and the older grandpa owned it. Lots of land, owned it. And the people were like, he'll never sell. He'll never sell his land. Well, the old man died. And then he had 2 sons. and the land was divided. And then they were like, well, the two boys won't sell the land. You know, it's family land. It's their dirt. And then one decided that the offer was good enough, and he sold half the land. And so you have a housing development coming in right here, and then you have the dirt. One way or the other, it's going to happen. And nobody owns that dirt. And if they own that dirt, they're not going to own it for very long. But right from the beginning, almost the second word, the ground, points to the fact that we need to have the mindset that it's not ours. Yeah, it's fertile, and whatever effort that I put into it made it so. But then again, why did it yield plentifully? Yeah, maybe he was a great farmer. Maybe he knew exactly how to cultivate the soil and work the soil to where it would yield. But, I mean, those of you that have any experience in farming understand that every year is not like that. I mean, you might have years of plenty, and then you might have years of not so much. And so it's our mindset, it's our thought. It's acknowledging whose ground it is. It's acknowledging how and why it yielded plentifully. And so when he experiences these blessings, in verse 17, he thinks within himself. Anybody have anything to say about that? I underlined that too. He thought within himself. What is Proverbs, was it 14, 12? There's a way. There is a way. Whatever else, there's a way, there's a path, there's a process, there's, a procedure. Whatever it is, there's a way that seems right to us. There's a way that seems right. Thought within himself. There's a way that seems right to us, but in the end, if we don't do it for the right reason, if we don't acknowledge the blessing, if we're not good stewards of what we have, in whatever way that we might consider, is not going to end well. It might seem okay. It might seem right. It might seem beneficial. But in the end, it's not going to turn out very well. So he thinks within himself, and he says, which I like the way Jesus, interjects the thoughts of the rich man. And he says, "What shall I do since I have no room to store my crops?" What about that section? What shall I do? What am I going to do because I don't have any room to store my crops? I've got plentiful. I've got all this stuff. I've got all this that I've harvested. I need a place to store it. What's the thought process here? Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, can you imagine the first thought? I was like, kind of, listening to other people and or entertaining, my own thought process of, what is my first response? You can tell a lot about a person by their responses. Well, I'm gonna, my crops this year, man, just plentiful. It's crazy. I don't even have enough room to store all this stuff. What am I gonna do? And what would be the first reaction? What's your response? Instead of, I'll do this. Instead of, there's probably a lot of hungry people. There's probably a lot of people that could benefit from this. I have all I need. So how about I share some of it? But instead, he's got no room, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to pull down my existing barns. And I'm thinking, how big were those? How big were the existing barns? And then I'm going to build greater. And then I'll be able to store all my crops and my goods. And then he even goes on in verse 19 and kind of continues. But he said, I'll say to my soul, and I like how Jesus does this one too. I'll say to my soul, have you ever done that? I'll say to myself, Self, what would you do in this situation? Self, how would you handle this particular situation? What will you do? Self, soul, you have many goods laid up. You're set. Take your ease, eat and drink, and be merry. And I circled every time, but in verses 17, 18, and 19, what do you notice in those three verses? Anything stand out in those three verses? Right. Yeah. How many times does he in three verses say I, me, my? Where does that mindset? What's the mindset in that? Automatically, not considering all the blessings. The ground yielded plentifully. I'm blessed with existing barns. I'm blessed with all that I need. I'm going to fill these. I'm going to do with these what I can, because that's what I have, and that's what I've been blessed with, and they're good enough. And I'm going to store what I need to make it through. Whatever I need to make it through. Yep.
Tell my brother to divide the family inheritance. So he's one of the children. Under Jewish law,
Right. Yeah.
He's already got it. He's already there. What's his focus? I need more. I need that certain number in my head. I need. And really, what the person who's complaining to Jesus should have been doing, and what the rich man in the story should have been doing, is asking, how can I use what I've been blessed with to serve God? That's the huge fallacy in their thinking.
Yeah. And let's piggyback off that, what they should have been doing or should have thought in their process. What did the rich fool, before Jesus calls him a fool, what did the rich farmer, landowner, what did he do right? He did some things right. And we can't beat him up, entirely. But what did he do right before we point out the things that he did wrong? Put in the work. He was obviously a very good farmer. He was good at what he did. I'm not so sure that, maybe he was a good businessman, maybe he wasn't. I don't know. But storing up as much as he did, and toward the point where he had to build even greater and bigger barns, he's pretty much controlling the supply and demand of produce. What happens when supply and demand is controlled? What happens to prices? They go up. Yeah, when the demand is there, man, you can ask anything you want. And man, he's got a bunch. He's got plentiful. He has all he needs and then some. So he's essentially controlling supply and demand. So maybe he was a really smart businessman. Anything else that you can note that he did right? Yeah. Anything wrong with planning? No, not a thing. Yeah. Nothing wrong with being successful. Nothing wrong with having barns. You put anything you want in that blank. You tear down the old. Tear down whatever is not sufficient. Tear down the old model. That was, some of us, some people live off of other people's throwaways. Some of us probably would have loved to have that first barn. Because I'm guessing if he's already rich, that barn was nice. It just wasn't big enough. So, he's got some things going for him, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Kevin, you had a thought.
This is probably a Jewish man. Living under the law, there was plenty in the law saying that as you did well, you were expected, according to the Jewish law, to provide for people who didn't have enough. So it wasn't just his attitude that should have made him love people enough. It was building the law. If you were successful and had plenty of money, you were demanded to share it with those who didn't have it. That's what he was trying to get around. So tear his heart down, put everything in new barns, bigger barns, so doesn't have to share it with anybody, and he's just going to take a break and live off of what he can. This was contrary to the law.
So is he essentially camouflaging his wealth? Well, yeah. He's trying to keep it all. I wonder what it would have looked like had he kept the old barn and then done whatever with the extra, drawn a little more attention to himself, or yeah, interesting thought. Not only was he kind of skirting the the whole issue of sharing and giving and doing what's right, but he was potentially disobeying the law in his actions. Yeah. Yeah. Help a lot of people, and in turn, they would help him as well. So what did he do wrong? So we see some things that he did right. We see how he was successful. We see how he was a planner and a really good farmer and all of that. What did he get wrong? Yeah. Perspective, mindset. Hey, yeah. He's like done, right? It looked like he's kind of retired, whether it's long term or temporary, I don't know, but yeah, he's essentially kind of done. Now it's time to kind of kick back and eat and drink and be merry. It's party time. Jeremiah? Yeah.
Where's the chink in the armor? Where's the flaw in how you're thinking? The flaw in how you're thinking is this life is
Yeah.
you're gonna die. Now what?
Yeah, he got death wrong, not only because he wasn't considering at some point, I'm going to die, but he also was in mindset probably that it was a ways away. There was time. I've got time to retire and enjoy life and kick back and take ease in life and do the things that I want to do and travel. I've got time for all of that. Yeah, he got that wrong because he wouldn't even live to see another day. And he got life wrong because he thought, life consisted of the abundance of what you have and your stuff and your possessions. So, let's accumulate all that we can and be good, be done. And we see that there's where he gets the label in verse 20 as a foolish man. Because he did not consider those things. He didn't consider, well, your life may be taken tomorrow. And your thought process is, well, I'm just going to build bigger because I have time to do that, and I'm going to stock those barns, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to enjoy life, and I'm going to settle, and I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to do the things that I want to do. And not considering the fact that it could be over tomorrow. And again, that goes back to our next life thinking. Whenever we plan, whenever we do things, whenever we look to the future, whenever we make considerations, Are they next life considerations? Is our thought process next life? And what's going to happen now? What's going to happen tomorrow? And he concludes that he who lays treasures for himself, again, himself, personal, is not rich toward God. Living a rich life toward God. Living an abundant life toward God. Being next life minded. Thinking about what I do now. How will that impact me spiritually tomorrow? What's my plan down the line? Is it to kick back and to have ease of life and be merry? Or am I plotting my future based on spiritual things? It's kind of like what we've been talking about in regard to heaven. It's, we could paint whatever picture we want of heaven, and it could be right. We could put in it whatever we wanted, and it may very well be right. But that's not the point. The point is will we be there? Will that be our final home? Are we trudging the path, making the decisions, and thinking about, when we make them, about next life in heaven? Let's bow forward. Father, we're so grateful for your parables and the things that you chose to use through your Son and his very eloquent words on how to live life and the importance of the things that we emphasize in life and the example that he set with his life. That we need to be spiritually minded always. Even if it's in our daily routine, if it's in work-related things, if it's in preparation for life, if it's retirement, whatever it is in this life, may we look to this example and acknowledge the fact that we need to be spiritually minded. We need to be heavenly minded. We need to be thinking about those things that will get us to the point where we can be with you once again. Father, help us to be that way. Help us to have the forethought. Help us to have the daily thought of the things that are important now versus the things that are important in the future. Father, help us to have a right perspective, the right mindset, to be able to make decisions about things that would happen in the future. Help us to always be mindful that we don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't know what this next year holds. But Father, help us to be next life minded in all of our decisions and the things that we do. Father, we thank you for this time that we've had to reflect on this parable, and we're grateful for your Son and the sacrifice that was made and the lessons taught as he walked this earth. We thank you so much for him and everything he means and the blessings he provides. And it's through his name we pray. Amen.